We start today in the Gemara on Daf Tezvav Amud Beis, 4 lines from the bottom. The Gemara here is speaking about the Mishnah that tells us that just like metal skewers are apostle for schach, so too the side boards of a bed, even when it's disassembled, those parts themselves are apostle for schach. And the question of the Gemara is, why would it be apostle? It's not a keli. It's not the bed, a full bed that could be used. It's dismantled. So it shouldn't be mekabel tumah, and it's wood, it's gidulei aretz, so why wouldn't it be kosher as chach? So the Gemara suggested to say that this is connected to what Rab Ami Bar Tuvyaimi said, that when you have remnants from garments, even though it's not anymore a garment, then it's not mekabel tumah, but because it comes from a garment, for that reason alone, there's a gezeira not to use it for the sukkah. So the same thing we say over here, that these dismantled parts of a bed also shouldn't be used for sukkah. So the Gemara now will answer that no, these sideboards of the bed are usable for themselves, not only because it could be put back together with the bed, and that's why it's still a keli in that sense, and it would be possible for the sukkah. Let's see inside. So the Gemara answers and says, Keda Amar Rab Chonin Amar Rebbe. Rab Chonin said in the name of Rebbe, or the girsa is supposed to be Amar Rav, in the name of Rav. Be'arucha ushtei kra'ayim b'ktsara. Either we're talking about the side boards of the bed on the length of the bed with the 2 legs, or we're talking about on the width of the bed, in the shorter side of the support on the side of the bed, along with the 2 legs, and they do serve a certain purpose, as the Gemara will soon explain what use it has. So Hachanami, we could say here as well, when our Mishnah speaks about Barucha Samita, and it says that it's Makabel Tumah, it means Barucha Ushtei Kra'ayim, it means the side board with the legs, or Biktsara, or the shorter side board on the width, the Shtei Kra'ayim along with the legs, and therefore it's Makabel Tumah. So now here the Gemara will bring the source where Rab Chonin said this in the name of Rav regarding what he said it, and what exactly the use of it is, and therefore it's Makabel Tumah. Heichit mit Rab Chonin Amar Rebbe or Amar Rav, where was this learned? Ahaditnan, regarding the following Mishnah, that it says Mita mitames chavila. A bed only becomes tamei when it's assembled as a bed together. Could be used as a bed, as a keli. So then it's mekabel tumah. Umitares chavila, and also if you're going to be toivel it, to be mitayed it, so you're only going to toivel it after you assemble it together to be as one bed. Even though if it became tamei when it was assembled as a bed and then it was dismantled, it's not tamei anymore, but when you assemble it again, the tumah comes back. So therefore you have to toivel it then when you assemble it again. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. Meaning Rabbi Eliezer says if the bed became tamei when it's dismantled, it's not mekabel tumah, it's not a keli, it's not useful for anything. And you don't toivel it when it's dismantled either. Only the bed put together all the parts, then it's a bed, then it's a keli. However, Chachamim say, the bed could become tamei, even the parts, different parts of the bed when it's disassembled, and you toivel it in the mikveh to be mitayed it, also different parts of the bed. So now, what is this? What parts were the Chachamim speaking about that they are useful separately, and therefore they have the status of a keli, even if it's not assembled in the bed? Amar Rab Chonin Amar Rebbe or Amar Rav. So this is where Rab Chonin said in the name of Rav. It's speaking about Arucha Ushtei Kra'ayim, the long board and the side support of the bed with the 2 legs, or Ktsara Ushtei Kra'ayim, the side support on the width of the bed with the 2 legs. Lamai Chazia, for what do they fit separately, even if it's not connected to the rest of the bed? Lemismechinu Aguda, you could attach, so if you have this long board with the 2 legs, so you attach 2 pieces of wood at both ends, and then you lean it on the wall. And you could sit on it. You throw over ropes on these, so that you support it along the wall, and then you throw ropes on it, and then you're able to sit on it. So even if it's not connected to the bed fully, it's useful in this way to support it on the wall. So therefore it's mekabel tumah, and you're mitayed it that way. And the same thing regarding sukkah, it would be possible for schach, and that's what our Mishnah was speaking about. Gufa, so now going back to this statement itself about the remnants of the garments, that it's possible for sukkah. Amar Ababi Bar Tuvyaimi, Sichecha bebaloi kelim. if you use the schach, remnants of garments, psula, it's going to be possible for the sukkah, even though it's not anymore a keli, it's not anymore makabel tumah, but there's a gzeira that you shouldn't use this either. My baloi kelim, when it says these remnants, worn out garments, what are we talking about? Amar Abaye matlanius she'ein bem shalish al shalish. We're talking about pieces of a garment that don't even have the minimum size of 3 by 3 finger breadths. Deloi chazien loilaniim v'loilashirim. It's so small that it can't be used by anybody. Not rich people, for sure, won't use this little size, and even poor people won't use it either. So in other words, it has no status of a garment at all for that reason, but nevertheless, because it came from a garment, there's a gzeir of Chazal not to use it. Tanya kavased Rabami bar Tevyoimi. We learned in a braisa similar to this halacha of Rabami bar Tevyoimi, machzeles shel shifa v'shel gemi, a machzeles that's made from shifa, it's made from some kind of a grass. So we're talking about a mat here that's made from this material of grass, or v'shel gemi from reeds. Shiureha, so the remnants of it, afal pi shenifchasu mikishiyura, even if it doesn't have its full shear, that it would be makabel tumah. So these mats are made to lie in it, and the shear for it to be makabel tumah is 6 by 6 tfachim. So if you have a remnant of it that does not have that shear, still a mesachichem b'hem. You can't use it as schach, exactly like the halacha of Rabami bar Tevyoimi, because it came from something which was a keli and makabel tumah. Now it says b'chlal in this braise, the halacha about mats, which is something that we're going to learn about more later in the Masechta. Machzeles hakonim gedola, a mat from reeds that's large. Mesachichem ba, it can be used for schach, because if it's large, that's not something that's made to lie on, so it's not a keli. So it's not makabel tumah. Ketana, if it's a small mat, so that's something that's made to lie on, that's a keli, a mesachichem ba. It cannot be used as chach. Rabbi Eliezer says, afi mekabelas tumah, even a mat which is the larger size is also makabel tumah, and vei mesachichem ba, and you can't use it as chach. What exactly is the basis of the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Eliezer? We'll see later. It's on Daf Chof. Going back to the Mishnah, so the Mishnah said, "Hachayted begodish." If someone digs a hole inside of a pile of grain to create the size of a sukkah, it's going to be possible because of tasav v'loy mina asui. The schach of the sukkah just happens automatically without you even doing any action to place it there, and that's possible. Amar Rav Huna, so Rav Huna said, "Leishanu." This wasn't learned. Elo she'ein sham cholol tefach b'meshach shiva. Only if this pile was completely stuffed up and closed inside. There wasn't even an opening of a space of a tefach in the minimum tefach in the height, that is, in the minimum size of a sukkah, 7 by 7 tefachim. Aval yesham chalal tefach b'meshach shiva. If even before you dug the hole there was a height of a space of a tefach in the area of 7 tefachim, so then areza sukkah. So then there's no issue that you just created the sukkah and there was no schach over there. You just opened it up, and now the schach came there automatically. If there was a chalal there of a tefach, so that's the minimum size of an oil, that there's a space there, so it's an oil for itself, and therefore this is schach that's there, and therefore it's going to be kosher for the sukkah. There's no issue that you created a hole, and just by creating the hole, it became schach. No. The hole is there, so therefore that itself is a shear for the space for the schach of the sukkah. Okay, so that's the distinction that Rav Huna makes over here. Tanya nami hachi, we learned so too in a braisa. Hachayted begodish lasis le sukkah hareze sukkah. That if someone digs a hole inside of this pile to create a space for a sukkah, so we learned in a braisa that it's a kosher sukkah. No, so the question is, v'hanan tnan, but in the Mishnah we learned ein sukkah, that if you dig a hole inside this pile, it's not considered to be a sukkah. Elalav shma mino k'der Rav Huna. So this proves what Rav Huna said, that it depends if there was a space of a tefach before, or there was no space of a tefach before you dug inside of it. Okay, so the point according to Rashi here is, does this schach that's in that area have the shem schach? If the pile was completely closed up, so then once you create the hole, you can't consider the pile of the grain that's on the top to have the name schach, because it has no name schach. It was always part of a pile. Schach means it's covering. It creates shade and covers over something. But if it was completely stuffed and closed up, it doesn't have the name schach. Whereas if even before you came to open it up, it already had an opening of a tefach, and then what was on the top part of the pile was schach. It was covering over something. It was covering over an open area of a tefach. That's the minimum size of an oil. So that has a name of schach. So therefore, even when you open it up, you can't say that the schach happened automatically by you digging the hole. The schach was there. It was covering. There is a machlokes rishonim, however, regarding this tefach that we're speaking about. So you have the height of a sukkah that has to be 10 tefachim. Inside this pile, you have to dig that height of 10 tefachim. So here we're speaking about that there was an opening of just one tefach, and that's enough to create the name schach for what's above. But the question is, does it have to be, that tefach has to be at the top, right below where that schach will now be? Or even if you have one tefach all the way at the bottom, and then you dig higher up, and you open it up completely to the height of 10 tefachim, is that also going to be enough? Then at the top it should have the name schach. So that's the machlokes rishonim. Ike the Ramila le Mirma. Others said the same point, but they asked it as a contradiction. Tanan, in our Mishnah, we learned achaytit begadish lasas le sukkah. You dig a hole inside of a pile to create the size for a sukkah. Ain't a sukkah. It's not a sukkah. But v'hatanya, in a brayse we learned that harei a sukkah, digging a hole in a pile is a sukkah. Rav Huna gave an answer and explained, like kashya, it's not a contradiction. In the Brayse it's speaking about where there was a space of a height of a tefach in the area of 7 tefachim, and therefore it has a name schach. There was no opening at all, it was all stuffed up, and therefore there is no name schach here b'chlal, and therefore that's an issue of tasav eloi minaseh. Sagt the Heilige Mishnah, Hamishalshal, the Fanois, Mulmaila Lamata. A person that's building the wall of a sukkah, and he's building the wall of the sukkah from the top, closer to the schach, coming down to the bottom, to the ground. Im Gavayim and Aretz Shloishet Tfachim, if he builds the wall and he doesn't reach all the way down to the ground, and it remains above the ground, removed from the ground, 3 Tfachim, Psula. So this wall is going to be puzzle. Even though usually there's a halacha of good achis, that if I have the height of the wall higher up, so I consider it as if it extends and is lower down to the bottom. But over here, since there's an opening on the bottom of 3 tfachim, which is the height that a goat could walk through it, so therefore that's mafsik, and we don't consider the wall to be extended till the bottom, and it's possible. If someone's building the wall starting from the bottom and building upwards, and it doesn't reach all the way up to the schach, im gevaya asara tfachim. So over here, as long as the height of this wall is 10 tfachim, doesn't matter how much space of opening there is between the end of the wall and where the schach are, ksheira, it's going to be kosher. Rabbi Yossi argues and says, Kishem, shemul mata l'mayla asara tfachim. Just like when we say, when you build a wall from below going up, you have to have the height at 10 tfachim, and the space between the schach and the wall doesn't matter as long as it has that height. The same halacha applies from above going down, that as long as you have a wall in the size of 10 tfachim, in the shiur of 10 tfachim, it doesn't matter if there's an opening at the bottom more than 3 tfachim, it's going to be kosher. In other words, Rabbi Yossi holds we do apply the concept of good asik, that we consider it as if it's extending down, and even though, as the Gemara will call this a mechitza tluya, this is a hanging wall that's suspended sort of, it's hanging, it's up, and it doesn't extend all the way down to the bottom, yet that's a mechitza tluya, has the minimum shiur of 10 tfachim, is a good mechitza. So the Gemara, what's the basis of their machlokes? Mar savar mechitza tluya materes. Rabbi Yossi says a mechitza hanging, even though there's an opening in the bottom, it's matter, it's good. Mar savar mechitza tluya ain't a materes. The Tanakama holds that a hanging mechitza, because it has the opening of 3 tfachim at the bottom, so you can't consider it as if it extends down to the bottom, so it's not matter. Therefore, it won't be a good mechitza for the sukkah. And the same would apply to Shabbos as well, that if it's hanging, it won't be a good mechitza. The Gemara here will bring where we find this machlokes in one scenario regarding Shabbos. So Tanan Asam, we learned them in the Mishnah, Masechta Eruvin. And here there's going to be a Gemara which is basically a repetition of a Sugya Eruvin. Boyer shebein shtei chatzeres. You have a pit filled with water that's positioned right between 2 courtyards. So the halacha on Shabbos is that midrabanan there's a gzeira not to carry from one courtyard to another courtyard. As if you have a house in one courtyard and you want to take items from the house of one courtyard and then carry it over to a different courtyard, you're not allowed. So that's the gzeira of Chazal. So what happens if you have a pit of water that's positioned right in the middle of two courtyards? And the issue of carrying from one courtyard to another courtyard is when you have a wall that goes across the two courtyards and it separates these two courtyards. Usually there's a simple eitzah. You can make an eidav chatzeris, and then you can carry from one to another. But if you have a wall that separates these two courtyards and there's no opening in the wall of 4 Tvachim, I believe it is, or 4 Tvachim, you don't have an opening in that wall to connect these two courtyards, you can't make an Erev Chatzeris between these two courtyards. So that's the case we're talking about over here. Two courtyards with a wall between them, and then below this wall, right in the middle, between these two courtyards, there's a pit of water. Part of the water is in one courtyard, and part of the water is another courtyard. So the issue is, this water is mixed. If you're going to want to draw water from this pit and then bring it into your house, you're essentially bringing water from the other courtyard and then bringing it into your house, and that's not allowed. So that's the issue that we're dealing with here. So what can we do to make a heter that you should be able to take from this water into your house? So you can't fill the water from it on Shabbos. You have to build a partition inside the pit in the height of 10 tfachim to create a separation in the water. Part of the water is from your courtyard and part of the water is from the other courtyard. So you have to create that partition inside. Now, where exactly do you have to place this partition inside the pit? So it could be beimil maila, it could be at the beginning, from the opening, from the beginning of the pit, which is really at the top of it, above even the level of the water. The partition doesn't have to actually be inside the water to separate the water off one side and the other side. It could be on top of the pit, but inside the pit though. Beimil mata, or it could be further down inside the pit, closer to the water. Beim b'saycha ignai. But according to Rashi, the way to understand this, beim b'saycha ignai means whether it's above at the opening of the pit or further down, closer to the water, it has to all be inside the pit. It can't be above the pit. If it's above the pit, any partition above, we will not consider it to be extended downward inside the pit. It has to be inside the pit, whether on top of the water, whether lower down, closer to the water, or inside the water, but inside the pit. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kama. So the basis of what the Tanna Kama is saying is, even though, as I said before, what are we speaking about over here? There is a wall that separates the two chatzeros that runs across this pit of water, on top of it. But that wall that runs across on top of the pit, outside of it, above it, is not going to separate, is not going to be used as a partition to consider the water inside to be separated from one from another. Now, even though the water inside, even with this partition that's above the water, mixes, the water is fluid, it mixes. But if you have a partition that's inside the water, so then over there, not inside the water only, but inside the pit, I consider that partition to be extended downward inside the water, and you can draw the water from your side, the other person can draw the water from his side. But the wall that's above the pit, running across it, that is a mechitza tluya, it's hanging, it's extended above the pit, and that we do not consider as if it extends down to separate the waters from one side and the other side. On that, Abshim ben Gamliel says, Abshim Gamliel Oimer, that this is a machlokes of Beishamai and Beisilo. Beishamai Yoimrim Mul Maila. Beishamai says that the water, it's enough if you place the partition inside the pit, but even at the opening, at the beginning of the pit, further away from the water. Beisilo Yoimrim, Beisilo in this case, the more machmir, Beisilo says Mul Mata. You have to place the partition inside the pit, lower down near the water. Rabbi Yehuda has a third opinion, and he says, any partition that you place inside the pit is not going to accomplish anything more than the wall that you have running across this pit above it. So since you have that wall running across it above the pit, that is a separation between the waters on one side and the waters on the other side, and I don't need any additional partition placed inside the pit itself. In other words, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion here is based on the concept of a mechitza tluya, that you have this partition, this wall that's above the pit, and it's not inside, it doesn't go inside where the water is, but yet because it's on top, it's tluya, it's on top, but I consider it as if it extends downward, and it's good enough. So seemingly, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion here is the same as the opinion as Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah when you have the partition, the wall of the Sukkah, and it doesn't extend downward all the way. There's an opening of 3 tefachim, but that's good that we consider it as if it extends down. So now the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Bar Bachan Amar Rabbi Yechanan Rabbi Yehuda b'shittas Rabbi Yossi Amra. What Rabbi Yehuda says here regarding this pit by Shabbos between the two chatzeres, he's saying it in the same opinion as Rabbi Yossi in our Mishnah. The Amma that said mechitzat chluya materes, that a hanging mechitza that doesn't extend all the way down is matter, the walls for the sukkah. And the same thing over here regarding this wall that runs across on top of the pit of water. So even though it's above, it's considered as if it goes down inside and it's matter. Sagt die Gemara veloihi, but this comparison is not true. Why not? Rabbi Yehuda, loy Rabbi Yehuda savala ka Rabbi Yossi, not Rabbi Yehuda agrees to Rabbi Yossi. Veloy Rabbi Yossi savala ka Rabbi Yehuda, and not Rabbi Yossi holds like Rabbi Yehuda. There's a difference between the cases. Why? Loy Rabbi Yehuda savala ka Rabbi Yossi. When Rabbi Yehuda there says that we can rely on this kind of mechitza, he's not saying it like Rabbi Yossi here. Why? Ad kan loikam Rabbi Yehuda hasam. When did Rabbi Yehuda say over there that you can apply, you can use this leniency of this hanging mechitza? Ela beiruve chatzeres the rabbanon. This is only regarding these 2 chatzeres, where the whole gzeira of not carrying from one chatzer to another chatzer into the house of that chatzer is all a gzeira mit the rabbanon. So there we can rely on this mechitza tluya. Aval hacha sukkah the iraisa here we're talking about being machshir a sukkah menatayre loy. Rabbi Yehuda wouldn't agree that you can use this kind of mechitza. In the reverse, V'loi Rabbi Yossi savala ka Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi does not agree to Rabbi Yehuda either, because at kan lekam Rabbi Yossi hacha ela b'sukkah. Oh, he only said it here. The mitzvah saseh. Here we're talking about a mitzvah saseh of building a sukkah. Avol Shabbos, but over there we're talking about an isser of Shabbos, the isser skila, where the malachas of Shabbos in general are an issa of skila. So therefore over there, even this wall, which is regarding the chatzeres, which is only midrabanan, but because it's a gzeira midrabanan regarding an issa of Shabbos, which in general is a issa skila, so loy over there maybe he was more machmer, and therefore you can't learn from the case over here the kula that there is, but that Rabbi Yossi said here by sukkah. The Gemara brings v'im taimana. If you're going to say that Rabbi Yossi only said his halacha regarding sukkah, by sukkah he was more lenient because it's only a mitzvah saseh, but not benegay to hilchas Shabbos. But if you're going to ask a question on this, there was an incident that happened in Sipairi. Now Sipairi was the place where Rabbi Yossi was a Rosh Hashiva. So the Piskei Dinim in Sipairi were according to Rabbi Yossi. And as we'll bring soon over there was a story where they did rely on a mechitza tluya. So seemingly, we see that Rabbi Yossi does apply his opinion of mechitza tluya not only regarding sukkah, but also regarding Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Al pi mi nase, according to whose psak did they rely on the mechitza tluya in Sipairi? Al pi loy al pi Rabbi Yossi, it wasn't according to the psak of Rabbi Yossi, el al pi Rabbi Shmuel but Rabbi Yossi, but rather Rabbi Yossi had already passed away, and it was according to Rabbi Shmuel, his son, that gave the psak. Umay ma'isa. What was the story that happened over there in Sipairi? Yechiya said Rav Dimi came and reported, he said as follows, once it happened, they forgot to bring the Sefer Torah out of Shabbos to the shul, the place that they would need it on Shabbos. So, as Rashi explains, we're talking about over here about one courtyard that has many different houses in it, including one house that's used as a shul. So there's the gzeira of Chachamim not to carry out from the house into the chutzner, that because the chutzner is a shared area, so you can't carry from a house which is a private place. So they used to take the Sefer Torah from where it was in the shul and take it into a private house to protect it, because they didn't have safes or whatever it is to protect it from anybody that can come and take it. So on Erev Shabbos they would have to bring it back to the shul in order not to carry from the house through the chutzner if there was no Erev Chatzeris. So once on Erev Shabbos they forgot to bring the Sefer Torah to its place in the shul. So what do? L'machar, the next day on Shabbos, Pirsu Sadinin al Gabe Ha'amudim, there were poles there that they were able to create this pathway where they spread out these sheets along these poles, and then they were able to carry the Sefer Torah from the house where it was to the shul along this little pathway that was surrounded by these sadinim, so therefore now you're not carrying from a house which is a private ownership to the chutzah, which is a general shared area, because it's going through this pathway between these curtains, so to speak. And that's how they were able to carry the Sefer Torah. They brought the Sefer Torah and they read there. That's the story that Rav Dimi reported. So the Gemara now clarifies what the story was. Do you think that they actually spread these curtains on the poles on Shabbos? From where did they bring these sheets from? How did they carry out these sheets on Shabbos from the houses? Just like they can't carry the Sefer Torah, they can't carry the sheets from the house into the shared area, into the chutzah. So how do they bring this there? That's how Rashi learns pshat in this question. Taisus here has another pshat, and the point that this is a fundamental machlokes between Rashi and Taisus that comes up in Masechta Shabbos a few times regarding the issur of creating an oil on Shabbos. According to Rashi, the issue of creating an oil is only regarding a roof, not regarding walls. So therefore Rashi says, the Gemara's question here of the fact that they spread out these sheets on Shabbos to create these walls, there's no issue of creating an oil. The question of the Gemara is, how could they carry it out from the house into the shared area, into the chutzah? Taisus, there's a long Taisus here, and he argues with Rashi, and he brings Rayas. Ben Tamir says that the issue over here is, how could you create these walls on Shabbos? It's creating a wall. And creating a wall is also an issur of creating an oil on Shabbos. That was the Gemara's question over here. And I believe we paskin like Tosfos that on Shabbos you're not allowed to create even walls because it's an issue of an oil. So the Gemara answers that the story has to be that what happened was slightly differently. What happened was Ella Matzu Sadinin, Perusin al Gabe Amudim, they found an area from the house to the shul where they had these poles with the sheets spread out on it, and they were able to bring the Sefer Torah to read on it on Shabbos. Point is though, that these sheets were spread out on these poles, but they didn't extend all the way down to the ground. They were open 3 tfachim on the bottom. So these were mechitzas tluyais. And nevertheless, the psak was that you can rely on these mechitzas and you can carry the Sefer Torah. So who paskin so? So the Gemara is saying it wasn't Rabbi Yosi. It was Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yosi, because Rabbi Yosi said that you could rely on mechitzas tluyos only regarding Sukkah, not benegeya to Shabbos. Amar Rav Chisda, Amar Avimi. Rav Chisda said in the name of Avimi, Machzeles arba umashu. This is another halacha here regarding the walls for the sukkah. So of course the height of the walls of a sukkah has to be 10 tfachim, but here he's going to give us a scenario where the wall could only be 4 tfachim with a mashahu, and that will be good enough. So this wall of 4 tfachim and a mashahu, materes b'sukkah, will be matter, will be good enough as the wall for the sukkah, mishum deifen, for this wall. How? Heichi of it. What do you do in order to use such a short wall? So tali le be'emtza, what you do is you have to have the height of 10 tfachim. So you hang it right in the middle of those 10 tfachim, pachis mishloisha lamata, and you leave an opening of less than 3 tfachim on the bottom. So that's lavud, so that's like closed at the bottom. Upachis mishloisha lamayla, and you leave less than 3 tfachim on the top. So that's also lavud. So you have the continuation of the closure of 10 tfachim on the top. And v'chol pachis mishloisha kolavid dami. So less than shloisha is lavud. So you have less than 3 lavud on the bottom, less than 3 lavud on the top. So you have to have in the middle 4 tfachim, with a mashu sticking out on the bottom, a mashu sticking out at the top, so you have a full closure of 10 tfachim. That's the din of lavud. Frag the Gemara, pshita. This is obvious. I mean, we know this halacha of lavud. We learned it before. So what's the chiddush of what Rav Chisda said here, that there's a halacha of lavud? So the Gemara answers, ma'al detema. The chiddush is, I would think to say, chad lavud amrina. The halacha l'moshe misina of lavud is only to use lavud once. Trei lavud lo yamrinon, to apply lavud in the same wall at the top and at the bottom, that so far we don't go to consider it in closure completely. Kamash Malon, that was his chiddush, that we could use lavud twice in the same wall at the top and at the bottom. Meisvei, the Gemara asks a question on this, in the Braisa it says, Shiva umashu materes besukkah mishum deifen. That if you want to use lavud, you're not making a wall that's full 10 tfachim, so you could have a wall that's the height of 7 tfachim and a mashahu, so then it's going to be lavud. Then you have only an opening of less than 3 tfachim. So the Braise here gives the shiur of the minimum height of this wall itself of being 7 and a mashahu, not 4 and 2 mashahus. So we see that you could only use lavud once. So the Gemara answers, there's no question here. Kitanyahi, that brisa is not speaking about a height of a sukkah that's the minimum size of 10 tfachim. That is speaking about the sukkah gedayla, with a higher sukkah. Umay kamashmalon, and what's the chiddush over there? The mishalshal in tfana is mulmayla lamata kerab yasi. That over there the chiddush is that you can have a sukkah which is 7 and a mashuhu, and it has the opening on the top less than 3 tfachim. So therefore over there you're using lavud once at the top, and the chiddush that he's saying is that although at the bottom it has an opening which is more than 3 tfachim, nevertheless, that he's saying that you pass, this brisa is saying like Rabbi Yossi, that the opening at the bottom doesn't matter. You don't need a second lavud if it's a tall sukkah, even though at the bottom it's open more than 3 tfachim. That was the chiddush of that brisa. So it's not connected to what we're speaking about when you're using the lavud in a height of only 10 tfachim and you're using it twice, once at the top and once at the bottom. Rabami said, pas arbo mashuhu. So if you have a board that's 4 and a mashu. So here, this halacha is not discussing the height of the wall of a sukkah, but it's discussing the width of the wall of a sukkah. So what's the minimum width that you need for the wall of a sukkah? 7 tfachim. So if it's 4 tfachim and a mashuhu, matir b'sukkah mishum daifin. So that width would be enough for the sukkah to use as a wall. Umaykim la, and you position it b'pachis mishloisha tfachim samach l'daifin, within 3 tfachim of the other wall. So you have, let's say, a wall on the mizrach, which is 4 tfachim and a mashahu. So you position it within 3 tfachim of the wall on tzafin, the 2 walls that connect. So therefore it's going to be like you have an enclosure of 7 tfachim. If it's within 3 tfachim of the wall that's near it, it's like lavud, and that's an enclosure of 7 tfachim. So the Gemara asks, "My kamashmalon, what's the chiddush?" This is the halacha of lavud. So the Gemara answers, "Ha kamashmalon." His chiddush is the shiur meshech sukkah ketana shiva, that the size of a small sukkah is 7 tfachim. The shiur that it says in the Mishnah is reishei rubei v'shulchanei. It never says the exact size of what the amount is. So therefore he's saying it that amount of reishei rubei v'shulchanei is 7 tfachim. And the chiddush over here is not only regarding the space inside the sukkah, but he's speaking about the wall of the sukkah, that the wall of the sukkah has to be that shiur of 7 tfachim, and therefore if you have 4 tfachim and a mashu within the wall of the sukkah, so therefore it's going to be kosher. That was the shiur that he was giving us.